This week's procedure is the synthesis of benzocaine. For this procedure, you will need, glassware-wise, a 100 ml round-bottom flask and a condenser, reflux condenser. Of course, you need the tubing to hook the condenser up to the water and have the water flowing into the sink. You will also need then a source of heat. In this case, it's an electric heating mantle. Don't forget to get the controller that goes with it. And I'm going to ask that you get a magnetic stir motor. In order to use the stir motor, of course, you need one of the stir bars. So I'm going to suggest that you take one of the small football-shaped stir bars to put inside the round-bottom flask, and you can stir the reaction mixture as you are refluxing it. With this simple reflux setup, you really do only need the one clamp. Okay, and once you get things set up in a good location, of course I'm using one of the plate clamps at the bottom to support the stirrer as well as the heating mantle, and this way then all you need to do is undo the screw in the back and drop that down a little bit if you need to lower the heat, but adjust that so that the glass is clearly inside of the heating mantle and it's making good contact so that heat can be transferred effectively from the mantle to the round bottom flask. You probably will feel more comfortable with a clamp on the reflux condenser, but if you set it up this way, all you need to do then is just remove the condenser like that. It's very easy. You can place the powder funnel that you have inside the neck of the round bottom flask, add the 1.2 grams of para-amino benzoic acid and the 12 mLs of ethanol, give it a chance to dissolve, and then it says to carefully add 1 ml of concentrated sulfuric acid from a Pasteur pipette. While you do that, of course, the concentrated sulfuric acid will react with the PABA. The PABA has an amino group on it that's basic, and that will form a salt that will precipitate out of the reaction mixture. That's okay that that happens. Try to stir it while you're adding the acid, and that will help it from forming a big clump and make it stay a little bit more loose and floating around inside the ethanol. Once you've added the sulfuric acid, replace the reflux condenser, turn the heat on. You're going to need a higher heat setting, probably 7 or 8, to get the ethanol to reflux in a timely fashion. And allow it to reflux, I think, for 30 minutes, correct? Yes. Check at 30 minutes, it says, to see if all the solid has dissolved. And that's an important issue. The procedure actually says that you're going to do a reflux for a total of 60 to 75 minutes. But at the 30-minute mark, and remember, don't start counting time of reflux until reflux actually happens. That means you're seeing drips of ethanol come off the bottom of the condenser and drop back into the round bottom flask. That's when reflux begins. It's not when you first see bubbles. It's not when you turn the heat on. It's when you actually see the drops coming back into the flask. All right, that's when you start counting time. At the 30-minute mark, look inside the flask and see if all the solid has dissolved. If it has, great. Just keep on going for another 30 minutes. If it hasn't all dissolved, the procedure says that you should add a little, well, first turn off the heat, physically lower the heat. That will allow the flask to cool quicker. Once the flask cools, you add a little bit more acid and a little bit more ethanol, then push the glassware back together, the heat up against the bottom of the flask, turn the heat back on, get it back to reflux. Now here again, during that time that it was cooling off, that does not count as total reflux time. Once reflux begins to happen again, now you're back on the clock, all right? And go for the full 60 minutes or so. All the solid inside here should dissolve at some point during the time of reflux. Then when that is done, you turn the heat off. Physically lower this heat again. Just loosen up the screw in the back of the plate clamp, drop the heat down, allow the flask to cool off, and then follow the workup as talked about in the procedure, which is adding it slowly to 10% sodium carbonate, and then collecting what precipitates by vacuum filtration, washing with a copious quantity of water, and then checking by IR and melting point to see if you got the right stuff, okay? And you may have to recrystallize. And I think that's pretty much it for the actual setup of the reaction. It's a very simple reflux. It's easy to do. You should get a reasonably good yield from this. It's a pretty dependable reaction, so if you collect a product at the end, it ought to be the right stuff, benzocaine.